Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, I'm Shannon Deere, the Assistant Dean for Graduate Programs, here with your magnificent host, Ben Wiggins.
Thanks, Shannon, and welcome to May's MasterCast.
How are you, Ben?
I'm doing all right today. It's a nice Monday. It's a beautiful day in Aggie Land.
It is.
And
it's a little cold and dreary out there, but it is still beautiful.
It's a beautiful day in Aggie Land. It's not cold and dreary.
Dang it.
Did you have a nice weekend?
I did. Did you?
Yeah, we were not in Aggie Land. We were in Austin. But yeah, it was a nice weekend. Brielle got to hang with her cousins.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I was here. I was writing a journal article. So it was exciting, but good to get it done. It's not done, but it's mostly done. Feels good. Not on my plate right now. So I'm happy with that. But yeah. So today on the show, we have the founder of my favorite app, which is the Safe2Save app. And the founder is Marci Corry. After a student lost his life from a driver texting in College Station, Marci Corry decided to make an impact on safe driving in communities throughout Texas by founding Safe2Save in October 2016. Now we are 4 years later, and Safe2Save has nearly 500,000 users. Marci's goals for the future include expanding nationally, adding more businesses, and continuing to refine the app's features. For those of you that may not yet use Safe2Save, it is kind of uses gamification to incentivize you to drive undistracted. So you get points for every minute that you are driving without distraction, and then you can use those points as a discount on different things like restaurants and some online businesses. And it's pretty awesome. I love it and use it all the time. So Marci's ultimate goal is to end what she calls the epidemic of distracted driving. Marci is a graduate of Mays Business School. She got a marketing degree here. And outside of Safe2Save, she also assists with the sorority ministry at her local church, Grace Bible Southwood, and loves time playing outside with her husband, 2 kids, and their adorable golden-doodle bear. So welcome, Marci, to the show.
Yes, we enjoyed this conversation a great deal. We hope you enjoy it too. And get on Safe2Save. Wreck some noobs.
And if you listen to the end, there is a coupon code for getting 800 free bonus points when you download the app. We hope you enjoy.
We welcome Marci Corry to the show. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate your energy.
Thanks.
How was your weekend?
It was wonderful. Full of excitement at our house. It was great.
What all did you do?
Well, our kids are really visionary, and every few years they want to switch rooms, and so we had a lot of fun. It was really good. Made sure that we were very active this weekend.
What was your very first job?
Selling Cutco knives.
Oh.
So I never ever intended for that to be my job, but one of my friends had done that, and I didn't really even know what I was getting into. It just like extra marketing, and I was like, oh, I like marketing. I'll try that.
Any funny stories from knife selling?
No, except that I would have to do a beginning little trick for people, which was to cut a penny with some scissors, and I would always have to cut a longhorn. They didn't know I was doing A&M, but anyways, and sometimes I would mess up, or sometimes I would cut myself, and that was always really embarrassing. You never want to have a Band-Aid when you're showing up for a knife cutting event, and so
right.
That was always like the key thing, is you just wanted to be really careful to never have to have a Band-Aid when you're trying to show up to, knife. So.
I would have walked around with Band-Aids on my hands all the time. Look how sharp these suckers are.
My goodness.
All right. Give us 60 seconds on your road through Maze and beyond.
I do think that there was a season in my college time that I kind of thought that boundaries and limits were for somebody else, but they weren't for me. And so I will say that I tried to lead in my sorority, Chi Omega, and, leadership organizations, student government, I did like fish aids. And I remember Will Hurd, he was leading the MSC, and so he asked me to help lead in the MSC, and I was so honored by all these different leadership things that I just said yes to so many, but that's not the right way. You shouldn't try to lead in 16 different directions, because then you're pulled like silly putty. Instead, you should really zero in on one or two instead of being pulled in so many different directions, because then you're not the best version of yourself. And I even listened to a really good quote this morning on Brené Brown's podcast, and she even said in all of her data and research, she said there's one thing that people who really see the best in other people, there's one key thread, and it's people who have good personal boundaries. And I thought, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that really is something that does define who I am. I am someone who really sees the best in others, but there are certain seasons and certain times where there may be times where I've kind of like slipped, and I haven't always like done that to my like full potential. And so I will just say, anyone that may kind of look inside themselves and think I'm getting a little burned out, or I may not be my full potential, or I may be a little bitter, I'm not seeing the very best in other people around me, or I'm not as trusting in team projects, or I'm not as trusting in my own like relationships as I normally am I really having the best like personal boundaries, or am I saying yes to all the things? And so that was just a little thing that I thought would be helpful. But one other thing is just sleep is helpful. Exercise, just not thinking that you can always, push every limit. We didn't even have cell phones back then, except for these huge black bag phones. But I did push the limits one time, and many times, but one time in particular, I was working on a big project, got less than 4 hours of sleep, even had a 9.5-hour drive in front of me going from Oklahoma back to Midland, where I'm from, and I fell asleep at the wheel. And in fact, the whole event changed my life. And I think it even shaped maybe the trajectory of me starting this company even to this day. But anyways, I actually fell asleep at the wheel, came to an 18-wheeler was coming right at me. I overcorrected, flipped the car 3 times, a rancher's pole almost hit my head by just like 1 inch. And the whole car, it's like the whole thing crushed into this tiny little aluminum ball, except right where I was completely protected. And 12 cars even pulled over on the side of the road thinking, surely this person is not going to make it. And we were 45 minutes even from the closest, even small town. I have like one teeny tiny scar to this day to remind me of that day. But besides this tiny little mark, there was nothing wrong with me. Like, I just remember waking up in this like complete peaceful state thinking this is a miracle that I'm even alive. And the reason why I share that even right now is because it truly was a gift that the Lord saved me that day. I shouldn't have made it out of that crash, but I did. And it was a foolish thing that I did, which was to fall asleep at the wheel. Being drowsy and driving is like driving drunk. Same like texting and driving is like, it's even 6 times worse than driving drunk. And people kind of are complacent when they get behind the wheel. We think we can do all the things. We can't. And so all that to say, that was a moment that really kind of like changed the trajectory of how I lived. To not live for myself and not think I need to do all the things, but I even changed my career path after that day, actually.
Where did lightning strike? What was the moment where you knew, okay, I want to do this. I want to build something that will help people in this way.
Okay. So whenever the whole moment really hit me, I was actually at lunch with a friend that was in college, and we were thinking through, why are people so addicted to their phones? And, you look around and we're the only ones looking at each other eye to eye. Everyone's on their devices, not really, looking at each other. This is 4.5 years ago. And we were talking about how, beautiful it would be if we could even give people a sweet treat at the end of the meal for just talking to their family or each other and not their devices, and how awesome it would be to positively reward people for starting to break that addiction and even realizing that the task at hand or the people at hand are actually really important, that sometimes we have to break people away from the complacency because you don't realize how much time you're spending on your device. And she was telling me about those, cool Chick-fil-A scoop boxes that were there that summer. If you put, your devices in that box, then you could get a, ice cream cone at the end of the meal. And I was thinking, wow, someone needs to do that for people driving. How cool would that be? Because that's especially when you need to stop looking at your device, because, oh my goodness, I had done pharmaceutical sales for free before I, started staying at home with my kids, because at that time I was a stay-at-home mom, had 2 young kids. My husband was a pastor, but before that I had done pharmaceutical sales for years. And people have just been so distracted in the workforce. I think people kind of paint with broad strokes and think it's the blue-collar industry that is the issue that we need to have telematics on and really watch for distracted driving. But you don't always see people looking at white collar people with distracted driving issues. And so there's a real interesting thing going on. Even right now, I call companies and oh yeah, we have these and these things going on for our people. But then it's really only the blue collar workers that have this big brother thing going on, but they don't have anything going on for their leadership or their salespeople. And so it's just interesting that we just let people get by with texting, driving. It's all in the name of productivity, of course. These are busy people. We need to let them do their thing, And so I was one of them. We all were, right? It's oh, it's just one text. It's just changing this one thing on this one email or this one contract. It's all in the name of, we've got to get this done. There's no other choice. Well, there is a choice. You can pull over. You can get it done ahead of time, or you can do it on Zoom or whatever. And I just feel like we had to make a change. And I was thinking, if Fitbit can do this, meaning putting positive peer pressure on each other and doing these super fun competitions and getting people who didn't work out to all of a sudden work out and rolling into their wellness programs, we can do this. We can get a fun app. And so that's why I decided, let's just start this app and see if it goes anywhere, at least in College Station.
Give us 60 seconds on how Safe2Save works.
So Safe2Save is a free app and initiative that motivates people to not text and drive. So the way it works is you're going to download it on your phone, and you're going to get 2 points for each minute that you're going 10 miles an hour or more and not picking up your phone or messing with it. And so you'll actually get to even put a picture of people you love on the first screen, and it's going to say, is it really worth it? So it makes you really stop and think, is it worth it? That one email you were going to send, or that one text, or even changing some maps and music as you're on the go. And it's beautiful because you're racking up points as you're moving and not, moving your phone or touching it, but then you get to use those points at incredible restaurants like IHOP, Schlotchke's, Dairy Queen, Chick-fil-A. 1,500 restaurants all across the state of Texas. We're really active in College Station, Houston, San Antonio, Central Texas, West Texas, but we're expanding to pockets all across the state of Texas, and pretty soon we're going to be nationwide. Now, there's online deals as well, and we'd love to be adding even more online retailers. Compete with your friends and family, even your school. In fact, go to our website, Safe2Save.org. You can even put in that number 2, Safe2Save.org, and find out more. And please email us, literally info@Safe2Save.org, if you have any questions on how your company or any question that you have at all, because we'd love to help you get started.
How did you code the app? Like, how did you handle the tech side of it?
Oh, and if you only knew how untech savvy I am, it's kind of ridiculous that I run a tech company. So I needed to have a lot of help from that angle. I'm not a coder. In fact, a college student at A&M, a senior, helped me on my first round, and he helped do a prototype, basically. And we had a lot of very kind, wonderful Aggies that were our first beta testers. If y'all are sitting out there listening to this and you're a College Station person that was one of our original 10,000 users, it needed a lot of work. The original 10,000 people on the app, they kind of hung with us because they liked the idea. We had epic restaurants that were on it with some really sweet deals, but it needed some work from a tech angle just because we needed a lot of feedback and we needed some help on getting it to really get to where it needed to be. But it sure did change behavior. And so we knew that if you get people to put their phone down and get people to compete with people they knew and loved, we could work all that out. And so once we knew this was a viable deal, and Startup Aggieland helped me realize, don't put a lot of money into something until you could monetize it eventually, and it will change behavior, and then it will actually work, it will round a corner. And I was so thankful for that. So that's kind of when it reached 10,000 people and we knew this was actually going to be something, that's when we got someone who could help be the bridge to putting the Android version and then actually putting a lot of tech infrastructure to it.
Good bull to Startup Aggieland for sure. They're good friends of the show, and we appreciate
them. Wonderful. And they asked all the good questions, hard questions. And they were so generous with me, Ben, because I was this 38-year-old. I was like, where's Waldo? Who does not belong here? All these young people. And then I was there, and they were great with a former Aggie being right there in the room, taking all these notes and being one of them. It was very kind of them to let me in.
I know that feeling myself of being a slightly farther along person in the room at
Yes.
Startup Aggieland.
Yes.
So definitely familiar with that. What advice would you give to people who are considering business ideas that are intended to run from apps, that they're thinking about starting something that is app based? It's kind of that's the stereotype in the entrepreneurial world at this moment, and the pitfalls or the landmines of that section of the industry are perhaps equally stereotypical. But if you had a room full of people who are all thinking about starting apps, what would you tell them? Aside from, don't put a ton of money into it until you know you can monetize.
I would say ask 200 people 20 to 30 really critical questions that you're scared to get the answers of. And that was really important. And when I say 200 people, of the key age groups that you think that your demographic is going to be. And so I went to the Kai Mega House because I was an advisor, and I just asked the girls a lot of questions. And I had some hunches, but some of my hunches were wrong. And I was humble to say, yeah, I am wrong in some of these key things, because my data is showing that they actually aren't wanting to ever pay for this app. And even though I was kind of wanting the end user base to want to pay for this because they're going to be saving $300 a month on all these great deals. But I was so thankful for their honest feedback. So I didn't go to the App Store charging $1.99 for this app. But I remember they all came back saying, no, all these other apps are free on the marketplace. And so even though I was a mom who was used to paying $3.99 for a good app because I want them to be ad-free, moms don't mind paying for apps, hands down. We will pay for apps, but a college student doesn't. And so I needed to have good feedback. And that's just like one example. But you've got to have really good questions, and then you have to take their feedback and then be willing to change your business plan or change your thing, and but not go so hardcore in your change of plan that you completely abort your mission, which is to change, distracted driving is your mission or whatever, But I would really say keep asking lots and lots of questions, because Startup Aggie taught me that, and I would really think that was key. And then now we've started with businesses, and so because we're going after the construction and home health sector, because those are a lot of people who don't have things for distracted driving, we have to ask people lots and lots of questions, and I have to go back to a lot of that training. So if I was sitting there in front of a room of people that were thinking about making apps, so it's easy to make an app. There's lots of people waiting to code apps. The technology is not the hard part. The stickiness is not the hard part. The hard part is more in the psychology of it all, and getting feedback loops and then taking that back.
Yeah, the process you're talking about in lean entrepreneurship terms is customer development or customer discovery. What is there a particular resource aside from Startup Aggieland itself that you found particularly useful for shaping your customer discovery process?
We had an Eisenhower Leadership Development Program. So I was like in fellows in this thing called Eisenhower Leadership, and they taught us all these tools, and it was through the Bush School. And so I just went back to a bunch of tools that they taught us from back then. And it was a lot on like how to develop focus groups and how do you start to really dig in from like a marketing perspective and really get at what people's core desires are. And then interstate batteries, we had to do a lot of that. And so I use a lot of those resources that we used back then.
Okay. My favorite resource for the listeners, for anyone who hasn't heard this already, is a book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, I think. It's tough because customer discovery is maybe one of the most important processes in entrepreneurship, exactly as you were describing. But I've read a lot of the lean entrepreneurship books, and honestly, they do a very bad job of talking about this process. It's just not, they really emphasize get out of the building, get out of the building, get out of the building, as in go start talking to actual people. But in terms of the way you have the conversation with them, this is one of the big shortcomings, I think, still in the business community and the entrepreneurial community, is no one's talking about how to ask these questions. And by the way, if any of our listeners have resources to recommend that do talk a little bit more about this process, fantastic. Please send them to us at maysmastercast@gmail.com. But yeah, it's so this book, though, I think does a pretty good job, The Mom Test, and it's available on Amazon and Audible and wherever you may find your books. But that's why I asked, is because I'm always hoping for more resources on this process, because it is, as you said, so important.
It is so important. You got to get curious to ask people, and I think being in touch with when people have criticisms, really reading those and getting good, like not just putting those under the rug. So my husband is actually the one who is support at Safe2Save.org. And so it's not like we are outsourcing this overseas.
Right.
We are getting those, and he is responding to those. And so if people are having ideas, we get those. And we have 1,500 ambassadors for Safe2Save that give us ideas as well. And so we value people that have boots on the ground that give us loop backs on how could we be better, how could we improve. And so you never want to think that you can't learn different ideas from people. And I think that whenever you say get out of the building, it also means like ask the right questions and be curious. And so I always put my reporter hat on of like, okay, if I was a reporter right now, what would I be asking? I would want to know key questions, just kind of like you ask your podcast people, you know, how could we create more value for you? And what are the things that are missing? Like, for example, in telematics, you are missing key KPIs, but what are you really needing? And so a lot of times people will say, we are measuring hard braking, but we don't really know how many times people are actually looking at their phone. Well, you have some key lead indicators like, okay, hard braking, they're probably looking at their phones, right? Or how fast they're taking their turns, but you don't know for sure. So that means it's really hard to hold people accountable. Then if I'm asking the right questions to people, then I can find out if they want to know how many times people are looking at their phone. And then it starts to discover that. And what does a good dashboard look like that they would like to see? And then they will discover. And so it's nice to have just this art of discovery. And so I actually will write down like 15 questions before I go into a meeting, or even with my own staff, I'll write down questions for them to discover. So if I know they're about to go meet with some of our largest clients, I won't just assume that we know what adds the most value to Dairy Queen, right? So Dairy Queen wanted to add 15, or they wanted to add 590 locations in Texas. Great. But what would it be? What would success look like for them before they added nationwide with us? And so what are the key things that they want to look for? And so we have to know what those are before we can just start assuming things. And so we have to be in the art of question asking and seeing how can we create value. Because Safe2Save is trying to create value for restaurants, for end consumers, and for businesses. It's a lot of being able to be curious all the time.
Right. And it sounds like that process is part of your continuing growth process as well. Right. Is that the most important piece of growing the business? How do you engage with that now relative to how you did 4 years ago?
Back then, it was a lot of like me beating the doors myself and walking in and learning and being able to be firsthand. But now it's a lot of like having staff or ambassadors give good feedback because it's a team approach. And so you have to train your team on how to ask really good questions. And so training becomes really essential. So right now I'm putting a whole series of videos together for our ambassadors so that they have a whole learning management system. And so that we're operationalizing core values of these are how to ask good questions, because we don't want you just putting up window clings at all the Swatchkeys and La Madelines around San Antonio when you launch them. No, we want you going in there and asking really great questions of how we can add more value to you. What do you value? When Safe2Save users come, what would be ideal? Would you want them to give you good Yelp reviews? We can add that to our system. Is that a value? Okay, no. Google reviews. No. Good Facebook reviews. Great. Because we can do a pop-up. When people redeem, we could do a little fun pop-up. But we got to know what adds the most value to them, So I don't want to just shortchange things. I'm not going to just pay somebody to put a window cling up. You want to actually do something. If people are going to be in front of a general manager, you want to be able to train them on how to be curious.
So in terms of Safe2Save, who are the people that have kind of grabbed this vision and taken it on as their own? Like what flavor has that taken as it's kind of migrated outward from you and your circle?
So like, for example, Karen Saltzman in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. She is a mom of a 13-year-old who, the 13-year-old was hit and killed by a distracted driver. Mm-hmm. And so she's channeled her energy, instead of just being like angry and, coping in an unhealthy way. She's like, okay, I want to do something to help change San Antonio. It's not okay. We don't want to continue to have San Antonio be one of the highest distracted driving cities in Texas. And so she's helped channel that to let's make a difference in a positive way. And so helping share that out. And so that would be an example of an ambassador that's sharing that out in schools, helping start positive school-to-school safe driving competitions, helping make sure that, more restaurants are added and sharing that vision. And she's able to reach communities and people way more than I could by myself. Same way with, Deanna in Huntsville, a girl just flipping through Facebook killed her daughter and 3 other teens just instantly. And so now she's wanting to help start a movement in Huntsville and really get the word out. And not only is she helping share about Safe2Save, but she started a whole fun run. And so we're helping equip her to take that vision. And she's also, we want to help be entrepreneurial minded and help her, dream big of helping start Fun Run to help raise, money for other, distracted driving causes, because you want people with their grief to be able to keep moving forward and not to stay stuck, because this is a really tricky thing. It's not like MAD where you have like a really big organized movement. And so that's part of it.
Okay. And talk a little bit more about your partnerships like with universities and high schools. How is that moving forward with Safe2Save?
So with universities, as well as with high schools, people can do different competitions. And so let's say a college, like we'll just even use A&M as an example. Last year they did a competition with all the students. They competed to see who could have the most Safe2Save points. And it's awesome because, the students that win get different, cash incentives. And it's fun because schools can even compete against each other. So like right now, Shell and Permian Road Safety Coalition, they're even giving $27,000 to just the high schools in the Permian Basin area, which is like Midland, Odessa, that area. And it's fun because it can be rival, like school against school. And so you're going to see like $1,500 be given to the student council that has like the, highest number of points. So people are like, yeah, like school rivalry, but then also $75 to the kid that has the best score each week. And you want people to have like the best score, because we've changed up Safe2Save. So now it's not just on who has the most points, but you really want to do it based on who has the least distracted driving going on. And so see, right now it's like I have a score of 100. That means there's been 0 distractions. And so that's been a beautiful, scalable thing with Safe2Save. And we even have resources now that are online. So anyone, anywhere listening to this podcast, you can actually even click on 4 schools and then download resources. So you can be anywhere. We have thousands going on at a time, and people can download resources and have school-to-school competitions. And it's nice, too, because we encourage parents to participate. A lot of times people don't realize that parents being a good example, even before kids start to drive, makes a big difference. And so parents being part of those school-to-school competitions really do help. And we'll have, big university competitions going on. sorority competitions. Oh, Ben, you should see the Song Fest competitions going on at A&M. Those get really competitive. When you do like Try It Out versus Pi-Fi versus, Zeta. I mean, it is like intense to see them, because then we'll get like, $2,000 to the philanthropy that has the most, the best score, and they get wickedly competitive towards that. And it's really fun. And if you want to even start your own competition, you could even click a little trophy icon and click organize a competition.
Fantastic. How has COVID-19 changed the calculus of all this?
With COVID, you would think, roads would be a lot safer. Sadly, studies have shown that even though roads have been 50% less occupied, distracted driving actually went up 38%, and fatalities from crashes went up 14%. That was just in the first 6 weeks nationwide. Okay, that's a drive. Now in Texas alone, if you look at our numbers, we're up by 20 fatalities from where we were this time last year. So COVID has impacted distracted driving. There's been fewer amount of crashes, but the crashes have been more severe. It's not just distracted driving, it's also, intoxication. People are now sadly working 10 feet away from their own liquor bar at home, and then they're needing to get on the road. Their boss calls and they've already been, taking a drink, or people are being used to Zoom calls, and now they're taking Zoom calls on the road, and they're not turning their camera off because their, HR department hasn't updated their driving policies or had them take a training on, we don't do Zoom calls on a drive. There's just some key things culturally that we haven't taken super seriously when it comes to driving now in a COVID world. Now, as far as like our business goes, it has been interesting because people don't take distracted driving as seriously when it comes to, like, you don't get as much news, people don't, budget for it as much when it comes to hospitals. Of course, restaurants have taken a hit. And so it has been more challenging, but we have really pivoted well as a company, and I've been really proud of our team, because our two main ways that we monetize our company was from large hospitals and from restaurants. And so we did need to really stand on our third leg that we were building, which was through Safe2Save Pro. That's our employer program, which is companies that needed to hold their people accountable for not teching and driving behind the wheel. And so we've really built that out. So right when COVID started, we thought, let's really focus on that key part, because we know COVID is probably going to last even longer than what they say. And so this is something that we need to make sure and build up. And now that's a key core part of our business. So I would say it was already in the works, but now it's really amplified part of our business.
I like that. In terms of other opportunities that have kind of bubbled up over time, you and I talked several days ago about gender diversification, and it's kind of going in the opposite direction from when people hear gender diversification, they're talking about including women, and in this case, it's the other way around. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So it's interesting that 65% of our users, so we have over 412,000 users on Safe2Save, and 65% are female. And we are working hard to try to get more males on Safe2Save. And one way that we are doing it is through encouraging competitions. So if a female in the family encourages their significant other, whether it's a boyfriend, a brother, or a husband, to compete with them on who can have the best score on Safe2Save, that helps the male then want to join. Because sometimes savings alone don't, motivate a male to join as much. But we really want to get more males on board. And so if you're a male out there listening, we really want to get more rewards that excite males. We do have a lot of male-oriented rewards now. Now that we have Academy, Aceable, Adidas, Island Outfitters, Best Buy, a bunch of different online rewards people don't know that we have, as well as like restaurants, obviously, that appeal to males as well. But the competitive side, I think that that's key. People are 25 times more engaged on Safe2Save if they've been in a competition. We know that from the data. And so, yes, I even asked you, Ben, how you think we can get more males, you being a male, involved in Safe2Save. And so do you have any more thoughts on that?
I do. And it's, so we talked a little bit, we've discussed this previously, but for our listeners, one of my thoughts was, it's, so as an Overwatch player, Kyle and Shannon are rolling their eyes right now, but in Overwatch, you get audio and visual feedback when you do something well within the game. And it's like, even from like, there's this little ringing sound that plays when you confirm a kill in the game, or when you capture an objective. Like this sound plays to let you know, hey, you did it right. You're winning right now. And obviously visual feedback is not what you want, because you don't want people looking at their phones unless it's at the end of the drive. And audio feedback you could do at any time. And it's at least in Overwatch, there seems to be this really, like, the little chirp, the kind of chirping, ringing sound that plays when you confirm a kill. I shared with you, like, I hear that in my sleep. It's and the objective capture sound. I've had dreams with that sound in it, with that sound in them. And so I think small scale, like immediate feedback, is something that maybe everyone will respond to, but I think certainly men may respond to, especially those of us who are gamers, because that's kind of a reward system we're very used to already.
I actually took that feedback even back to our team, and we're even implementing something already on the trellis board to have some type of feedback, because I think that's so wise. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because we want to give that feedback loop. For any males listening to, please give us feedback. So if people want to know, well, how do I give feedback? Click the settings and then just click contact support. We would love to know, negative or positive, what you think would be helpful to get more male support, and then also more industry support. So, for example, there's a lot of industries that don't have any type of accountability in, male-dominated industries, where there's a lot of just texting and driving going on, and it's just very normative, and people actually feel the pressure to do it, and they don't even realize it, and we don't even speak about it. And so, for example, people feel the pressure that they have to respond back to their boss and get to a place on time. And that's not okay. We shouldn't have to, from an employer, feel that we have to respond and get somewhere. Those are two conflicting things from a boss. And we need to either, A, as management, say, 60% of my salespeople are having to get to Dallas this morning. I need to just go ahead and reschedule that conference call for tomorrow and not make them present while they're actually on the road, because their safety is important. Or B, just make them reschedule it ahead of time. Like, we don't need to just cut corners, because we are taking their safety, we need to take their safety seriously. And I think that there's some key things happening behind the wheel that we're not realizing that we're doing. And so all that to say, leadership really can matter, male and female. But it's not, just because you've gotten away with it 95 times out of 100 doesn't mean you will each time. And there's some crazy statistics out there, like 80% of all crashes in America right now have something to do with the device. That's crazy for focus drive. When you're texting and driving, it's 6 times more dangerous than driving drunk. oh my gosh, that's so crazy. You're 23 times more likely to crash when you text and drive. Okay, that's also the same as having 4 beers in your system. That also makes you 23 times more likely to crash, So there's a lot of wild stats that people don't really talk about, but it really does make a difference. So we want to care for our workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. What's been the single best moment for you in terms of Safe2Save's impact on the community?
Whenever we launched into San Antonio, and we had a press conference, and they shared to the whole city, both in Spanish and in English, how important it was to drive now and text later. And they shared it in such a way that it just really brought hands and feet to kind of what we've been sharing all along, but shared from the vision of a trauma surgeon and how he's been trying for years to have a way to help transform communities, and how victims, they do a lot with trauma services, and just because they're one of the busiest trauma units, they don't want to be. And it was just one of those moments in my career where I was like, this is one of the proudest moments of being able to hear University Health is such an amazing hospital, and they are choosing to be the title sponsor of this app. And so when you pull it up in San Antonio, it says, is it really worth it? And everyone pulls up their picture of their family. And whether it's in English or in Spanish, and it has their family, it says, is it worth it? University Health says no. And here's their hospital and their chief trauma talking about how we don't want to see you. We want you instead using Safe2Save and preventing crashes. And we've seen through studies that this does lower it by 21%, even among teens. That really, it resonated with me to saying, this is real. This is making a difference.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
One last question before we move to rapid fire. Let's talk a little bit about your ADHD diagnosis and how that impacted your interaction with your team. We've talked a little bit about visionary integrator, and for you as a visionary, amplifying the voice of the integrator. Tell us a little bit more about all of that.
So it wasn't until a year ago that I was diagnosed with ADHD, and it was because I was starting to see patterns in myself, especially with my own team as this was growing larger, and we had so many different, sections of our business that I thought, am I crippling some of our growth because of not being able to focus? Because I would ask somebody to do something, and then I would forget that I asked them to do that, and then I would ask them to do something else. And that wasn't very fair for me. And I really needed to kind of look into that. And so I was talking to my doctor about it, and then I realized after doing this test, they said, yes, you don't have any forms of anxiety or depression, but whoa, your ADHD is off the charts. And as a 40-year-old, I was like, why has no one told me this my whole life, that I have a crazy amount of ADHD? And thank goodness now I have way more under control. But the deal is sometimes with high-performing females that are people pleasers and that have made really good grades, it can go undetected. But I don't want to let that keep other adults from getting tested, because it was starting to really wear on my team. And I think it's really important for people, especially that are entrepreneurs, to get tested, because there can be some really good things about a certain personality type, but you don't want to let being too scattered keep you from being able to be the best leader you can, because you don't want to wear people out. You don't want to ask them to do something and then forget that you've given them that direction and then you're redirecting them, because that's not fair. And so I've grown a lot in self-awareness, and I've grown a lot in apologizing and being able to really make sure that I'm having really good integrators that I've hired, and I value that skill set so much, because you can't do something epic without a really great integrator. And the bigger Safe2Save gets, I demote myself a little bit more each year. And it's beautiful, because I never want to have founder's folly. And so this year I demoted myself, and I'm so excited about it. And I know that sounds really weird. And so for people listening out there, people are like, wait, what? She's the founder. Why is she not CEO anymore? And I'm like, no, it's beautiful, because the bigger sometimes something gets, you also have to be more self-aware. And I want to be very aware of my own personal boundaries, because I want to be able to see the best in others. B, I do have certain weaknesses, and I know that this company is amazing. It has amazing potential, and it's going to just have this huge, I have no lid. I don't want to be any type of ceiling. And I could start to see, if I'm not careful, I could put a ceiling on it with my own limitations. And so I want to make sure that as we bring in some investors, and we have the potential to bring in some really neat big leaders, and I could actually bring in some amazing integrators and even have them more in the spotlight and put myself more on the side. So anyways, all that to say, I'm excited about actually taking a little bit of a stage left step and valuing the role of the integrator, and making sure that I don't, burn staff out, but instead have a correct, humble view of the strengths that I have. I don't have to try to do all the things.
Lovely. I appreciate the level of self-awareness it takes to take that kind of step.
It's also like a beautiful relay race too, where sometimes as a founder, you can bring something into the world and you can help start creating something, but it doesn't mean that we have to be the one who carries it all the way around the stadium, right? Because maybe I'm a really good starter, but there's someone like an integrator that's a better person for this other part of the lap. And it's wrong of me to keep going if I could possibly not be able to take it to the next level as well as somebody else. And does it matter that I'm male or female? No, we're all people. Like, we're all created for greatness and for beauty. And I don't think that gender should have anything to do with it, because I'm just looking for the best possible person to pass the baton on to. So it does happen to be a male that I chose to, give my baton to. And so I chose this wonderful President Greg to pass my baton to. And I do think that a female or a male can run a great company. But my key thing is I just didn't want to have founder's folly. And a good starter can dream big. But because of some of my ADHD tendencies, I love to start and dream and think about all the possibilities, but I don't love to obsess over all the details and the Monday board or the who's going to get every little thing done to make sure it all happens. And so I needed someone to be able to do all those things so that I could dream up the next thing, which we're about to announce in a couple months, our next new vision for a component for Safe2Save. And that's more life-giving for me, and it's more life-giving for the team if I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. So all that to say, it is a beautiful relay race, I think, in leadership.
Love that. We close each interview with Good Bull, an opportunity to recognize someone else for something great they've done, or just for being a cool person. Do you have anyone you would like to send Good Bull?
I would tell Dr. Parrish, thank you for the impact that she's made in my life and so many students, because she's really helped people really in sales and in challenging people to ask the right questions and going to the next level.
Dr. Parrish is a good friend of the show, and we appreciate that. Good bull to her. Mm-hmm. Marci, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. And for our listeners, you can put in the promotional code MaysMasterCast, MaysMasterCast, Mays Mastercast, for 800 bonus points when you download the app.
We hope you found the conversation with Marci as insightful as we did. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I wanted to first talk about the emphasis that she placed on personal boundaries, and specifically about not just thinking about yourself in setting those personal boundaries, but the impact that you have on other people. She told the story about falling asleep at the wheel, which I had an experience with in college too. I mean, when we're young, we don't always know our limits. I still don't always know my limits, but certainly have had more practice with that. And at that time, just didn't know what I could do as far as working and going to school and then driving. I was going back and forth from Sugar Land to coach swim team and then taking finals here in College Station, and was driving in the morning and fell asleep, spun the car around 3 times and slid quite a long way. Luckily, I didn't hit anything. I just had a lot of grass and mud in my car because I had my window down because I knew I was tired, and then had a ton of adrenaline and made it back to College Station, took my final exam, very amped up on adrenaline. But it was a very scary situation, and I don't think we really understand the impact of driving distracted and driving tired. It seems like, well, it'll be fine. I'll do this one thing, and it's not always fine. And it's important to think about setting boundaries that are going to keep us and others safe too.
Mm-hmm. I think that problems like this are often have to be solved in a really granular way. And as much good as I think Safe2Save is doing, I do think that there's still much more progress we can make in terms of the psychological process that leads to wanting to pick up your phone while you're driving.
Yeah, I think so too. And it is hard, I think, to teach the importance of doing something that maybe isn't natural for us for whatever reason. Like in this case, it's not natural for us to not look at our phones because we're addicted to looking at our phones. And so if we don't firsthand understand the consequences of doing that, it can be easy to disregard those, to think, well, I can do this, it's not going to happen to me, or it's just this one time. And if you really add up all the just this one times, it can be quite a bit that people are texting or driving tired. And even Marci said 80% of accidents occur because of distracted driving. I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, she said 80% have something to do with a device. And I'm not sure what that meant or how that played with distracted driving. But that phrasing, I actually noticed that she said that. And I was wondering if there were things other than distracted driving that may play into device.
That's a good question. I took it more as like she said, teching and driving instead of just texting and driving. That's what we often thought about, but there really is checking Facebook. And so the device could be more encompassing than just texting and driving is how I took that. But I don't know. Either way, that's a staggering number for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And we should be diligent about all of those things and being safe on the road. I'm just waiting for self-driving cars to come along and be safe enough because I'm on it. I need to work and sleep and put on my makeup while riding in a car. So I'm going to need that to get going real quick.
Kyle's boy, Elon, is working on it.
Kyle, can you call him up and tell him I'm going to need that in 2021? For our second takeaway, I really appreciated what Marci talked about with customer discovery. We talk about this on the show a lot, but it is the one thing that entrepreneurs don't want to do. Some of them don't know to do it, but then they don't want to do it. And I loved how she said, ask 200 people 20 to 30 questions you don't want the answer to. That I think is so important. What are the questions that you don't want to ask or you don't want to know the answer to? Those are the questions you should be asking. You mentioned I downloaded the book while you were talking that you mentioned the mom test. What were some tips from that book that you found particularly helpful for our listeners?
The best tip from that book is don't ask someone about general things that they would do in the future. Ask them about specific things that they have done in the past. So the best kind of general framing of the question of the customer discovery question is, when is the last time that you ran into a situation where X happened? And then X is kind of something that would be built around a situation where they might use your service. In an ideal customer discovery interview, the person does not know what your product is because they'll start shading their answers to make it sound like your product or service will be useful because they want to help you. They want you to come away from the discussion with a good feeling. But it's actually sometimes better if you come away from the discussion with a bad feeling or something that you need to be aware of because if all you think is, awesome, we thought we were saving the world, we still think we're saving the world, let's move forward. Well, you really didn't actually get anything from that conversation. It's only if you find, oh, this one thing may be more important than we thought, or this one thing may be much less important than we thought. That's where the learning is. So it's asking questions about specifics and ideally about things they've already done. How did you solve that problem before? What was most frustrating to you about that? And by the way, our former guest, Steve Tinkle, good friend of the show, is one of the world's experts on this process. I'm not bad at customer discovery. I'm pretty good at it, owing in part to my sales background. But Steve is a freaking wizard. So if you're really struggling with this, look up Steve Tinkle. Email us and we will connect you with him. If you have questions about customer discovery, Steve is he's the expert, and we'd be happy to put you in touch.
Yeah, and you can email us at maysmastercast@gmail.com. So I thought what Marci did well with customer discovery was she was not afraid of the answer she didn't want to hear. And she did really embrace that. Like you said, it was better to get answers that were surprising than answers confirming what she already was doing. And it seems like she's really open to feedback and adapting. And even if she comes away with a bad feeling about it, she's able to embrace that. And it sounded a little bit like that probably came from her Cutco days too. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, there's so much to be learned. Honestly, I think everybody should work in sales, even if for just a few weeks at some point or other in their lives, because the thing you have to understand about sales is that sales done right is not selling to people. It is helping people buy things that they do in fact want. And sales feels like a pushy process when it's done wrong. And all the proverbial sales jerks are like these pushy people who are slamming people into products or services that they don't need, that they're going to get overcharged for. That's not what sales is supposed to look like. And really coming to understand the process of helping someone purchase something that they do need it's really rewarding. It's really rewarding. And I'm sad that sales gets such a bad rap. One other thing from the mom test, one other tip is beware of feature requests. Feature requests can be informative, but they can also be distracting because you're getting back to talking about generalities in the future or hypotheticals instead of things that have actually happened. And one of the most important things about talking about past behaviors is you find out if it actually is that important to the person. How did you solve this problem? Well, actually, we didn't solve the problem. Oh, why not? Well, it just wasn't that important to us, or it wasn't that painful not to have the problem solved. Now you have your answer. And unfortunately, if that's the way the conversation goes, often it means that you don't have a value proposition anymore, but it's better to find that out now before you spend a lot of money on your value proposition.
Yep, that's true. For our last takeaway, I really appreciated what Marci said about stepping aside as the CEO and letting someone else take over. That relates to a lot of things that she said, even where she talked about after having the accident in college that she realized she needed to focus on personal boundaries, on her limitations, on doing things that will impact other people positively. And I thought all of that really played into stepping aside as CEO, that life lesson she had that had that great impact on her really is now having a great impact on Safe2Save and all the people that use it, that she said, I'm not the best person to lead this organization into the future. I was the best person to found it. I was the best person to grow it initially, but now it needs someone else. And that is such a humble and wise thing to do. In talking to a VC firm, that's one of the things they look for in management companies is, will the founders be willing to step aside when they reach their limitations, whatever those are, and let someone with more experience come in and take the company to the next level? Because if not, the company will plateau. And I really commend Marci for having the humility to say, I'm probably not the best person to lead this company into the future, and I'm going to let someone else do that.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, at least for me, has really only come with experience. I bristle sometimes at how much I think young people get held back in the business world in terms of, you're not old enough to understand this. I usually think that kind of statement is ill-informed. But in this case, the level of self-knowledge that requires to say, this is where I'm competent, and this is where someone else will be more competent than I will be. That's something that I think, knowing that balance and really kind of being able to hit exactly the razor of that boundary, where on this side are my competencies and on this side are my not as competencies. And where do I hit the point where I need to nudge these responsibilities towards someone else? That is really challenging. And I'm sure that there are, 20-year-olds who have the capability to do that really accurately, but it is a rare skill. And I think one that in many cases only comes with time.
Yeah, I think that would be really hard. And I think you're right that we oftentimes underestimate young people in business because they can learn. They can learn from other people. They can learn from other tools.
Right.
But what I think is important to recognize is, what is the place where either learning is going to cost too much for you or the company, or there's not a way to learn that thing. Like, it's a personality trait you can't overcome, or it's amount of experience that's going to take 10 years to develop and your company needs it today. Those are the points where it's important to recognize the limitations there.
Yeah.
Great episode with Marci. I really enjoyed her a lot.
Yeah, really enjoyed it too.
You want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. You can't put toothpaste back in the tube, and you can't get a little bit pregnant. H.R. Haldeman, and also my wife, who is pregnant.
She is? She told me she had big news, and then she wouldn't tell me what it was. Oh, congratulations.
Shannon, that was, I really enjoyed the transition there. You had this kind of like, oh.
I was thinking, I don't think we can use that quote. And then when you used it to announce your second baby, I'm all in. Oh, congratulations.
Thanks so much. And thanks to you for listening. Thanks to the listeners.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.